Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar that we're going to be hosting today of how successful product managers prioritize EOS scorecards. Just with every webinar, we're going to wait a few minutes just to make sure everybody has the chance to hop on live. If you can let us know where you're calling in from, that would be great. I myself am from Cleveland, Ohio. I know you're so jealous. So many people want to come visit me. But hey, I have room to grow plants and hang out, so I can't complain. We also have on today's call Todd, and Todd can do a quick intro of where he is before we get started here.
Yeah, I am in the snowy tundra right now of Salt Lake City, Utah, and we just got a whole bunch of snow this last little bit, and it's quite unusual in April that it's sticking the way it is. But that's where I'm from. It's great to be here.
Nice, nice. How much snow, though? Like feet?
Um, Probably, yeah. In some places, it was about 18 inches. So yeah.
Yeah. I was complaining about the weather in Cleveland. I can no longer complain about this. We don't have snow. We just have lots of cold wind. So yesterday was about 70. Now it's down back to 40, and it's just like that false spring. So I'm very jealous of my Brazilian coworkers when I call them. It's just so lovely to see their background. Nice, nice. So let me open up the chat here. Let me see if anybody chatted in of where they're coming in from. Not yet. I get it. Thursday afternoon. It looks like a few more people are joining. I'll give it about 30 more seconds and then we can start and kick things off. Nice. Berlin, Berlin.
Nice.
Yes, definitely. And if you have questions before we kick things off, feel free to put them in the chat already and we will prioritize them either throughout the chat or definitely at the end for sure. Nice, India. Got people from all over. Great. Well, it's great to see everybody coming in, especially chatting. So we can start and kick things off. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This is being recorded. It will be sent over after the webinar today. So don't worry about if you miss anything. You will get the recording. You can also share it with your colleagues if you'd like. So as for today, we are talking about all things EOS, especially scorecards. And what does that mean for product managers? So Todd here is a close client of mine that we've been working together. So I'm so excited for us to present Todd and his knowledge on EOS. So I'll hand it over to Todd to kind of kick things off here.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for having me here, Jen. This is awesome. So as we go through this, one of the things that I want to just provide a little bit of context on is what JobNimbus is and really what we do, and then provide some context of EOS. So JobNimbus is a all-in-one platform. It's a CRM platform for specifically roofing contractors. And our mission is to make contractors heroes. We're a very mission-driven company, and what that means to make contractors heroes is our contractors have business goals, and we want to help them accomplish them. We want them to become more profitable. We want them to be more organized and efficient and look professional as they're doing their work. And so we have a platform which helps to support that, whether that's helping with estimates and invoicing and collecting payment or communicating around a particular job, or whether that means that it's just managing their workflows and automating some of the steps for them and through our automations suite. There's a lot of things that we offer here. But I want to take a quick step back and provide a little bit of some history of JobNimbus and really where we've been and where we currently are and what our direction is. So JobNimbus actually just celebrated their 10-year anniversary, and so I've been around for 10 years. And several years after that, it was founded, we started building a mobile application. And this mobile application was built in Ionic, a hybrid framework. It's a really common thing to build, particularly for a small startup, to build a hybrid to serve both Android and iOS users, and with one code base. And we were able to build a solution that was an okay solution, but if you actually looked at the ratings, it wasn't very good. We had a lot of users complain about it, and actually wasn't very highly adopted. And so we made a difficult decision. We did one thing. We said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and scratch our old app. We're going to throw that away, which actually took a lot of, it just took a lot of, courage is not necessarily the right word, but it took a lot of, I guess, not looking at what we'd done in the past and just say, you know, we're going to throw away years worth of code and start building a new app from scratch, realizing that mobile is becoming more important, not less important for us. And we tooled up teams. We tooled up an iOS team. We also tooled up a Android team. So iOS team that knows Swift and Swift UI to be able to build a native app for iOS and a native app for Android in Jetpack Compose. And we're able to see some amazing things happen. One, our code base was able to, we were just able to deliver value to customers a lot quicker. We're also able to recruit some great talent that wanted to be a part of building native applications. And it helped to drive not just the customer app, like the rating itself to go to 4.7, but we were able to see a lot more adoption of the product being utilized across our platform. So we have a web application, and historically our mobile app has been roughly used about 30% of our users. We're now north of 80%, and a good chunk of those, their primary method of utilizing our platform is actually now through our mobile application, our mobile offering.
And Todd, I mean, especially when you're saying like getting rid of an app that already exists, I'm sure there was a lot of egos in that room to be like, you know, that's hard work to throw away an app that even, you know, if it isn't working, it's scary to start from basically zero and to start over. So that's great that your team was able to collaborate and understand that moving forward, a lot of change has to happen. So any hurdles that you had with like convincing your team to start over?
Yeah, great question. And there definitely was. It required. I mean, it's a big investment to say. One, we're going to go and retool the entire team, and we're going to go hire new team members and find them to help build a new native app. So that's one thing that requires a lot of capital. And then two, well, in essence, we're saying at the same time that we're asking for more capital, we're saying, hey, everything that we've built, we're actually no longer going to be using that at some point. And now we didn't like just throw away our old app right away. We did transition people off of our old app to the new app, but we now have removed both of them off of the app and Play Store. But it definitely took a lot of convincing. But the alignment really came around being able to see the problem. Like I said, mobile is becoming more important, not less, for our customer base. And can we really offer a truly great experience with what we have today? It kind of was the reoccurring theme that we kept on seeing. And we were able to rally around that and realize, you know, we actually can't provide them, our customers, the experience that they wanted under the current framework that we were using. And it doesn't mean that everyone, that means, you know, going native is the answer to everything. It just, that happened to be what it was for us, and it actually has worked out fairly well. We launched our native iOS app back in September of 2021, and we launched our native Android app in February or March of 2022.
Nice. Yeah, and I totally appreciate you giving us that background because I'm sure a lot of our attendees today are in something similar, you know, especially with the economy, what it is now, there could be a lot of pivots within the crowd today. So anything else to add on this slide? Because I know next we're going to talk about the quick agenda. So anything else or we can dive into that?
I think that's great.
Perfect. All right, so now that we are 10 minutes in, everyone is here. We have a good understanding of background about JobNimbus, and especially Todd, head of product at JobNimbus, you know, what challenges you faced in that background with the app itself. So for today's agenda, we are going to dive into a little bit more about like how Todd brought JobNimbus from that previous version to the version it is now with that EOS framework and that scorecard. So first of all, what is EOS? What is that scorecard? And then, of course, how do you set up an effective scorecard? So we can tell you what it is, what it isn't, but we want you to have actionable takeaways for today's call. So we'll go through what that scorecard is, good and bad. And then, of course, we'll talk about challenges within product teams today, especially for setting up KPI tracking. And then, of course, we want to align the teams with that scorecard to improve KPIs and experimentations. And then, of course, at the end, any questions that you have, feel free to ask them now. We'll have time at the end. And we also have questions prepared for our talk today for a few attendees who had questions before the webinar started. So we'll be asking those throughout the chat today as well. So Todd, tell us a little bit more about what EOS is and what that scorecard does.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I'll give a quick disclaimer. I am not an EOS coach or an EOS implementer by any means. Those people are great and they're awesome, but I'll just provide the context from my viewpoint of how it has worked within JobNimbus and what we've been able to see in terms of progress in implementing something like this. So EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And the Entrepreneurial Operating System, you can find books about this. So if you're a leader in business, a book to read would be Rocket Fuel. And if you read that book and by Gino Wickman, and if you read that book and determine that this is something that I'm interested in having my employees now implement, that a book that they could read is a book called What the Heck is EOS? And it's a book actually that's given to all of our employees when they're onboarded, along with a few other readings that we require in our employee onboarding. But EOS is, whether or not you have a label for what operating system you're using, think of it as you have an operating system in your business. And that could be by default or it could be by design. And what EOS is one of the things that will help drive, as the book talks about, with really putting rocket fuel on helping to focus in on goals and being able to then operationalize a vision to be able to achieve those goals. So the vision, you can kind of see here, there's a vision that kind of goes through, all right, there's 8 questions that you typically answer. And I won't get into all of the minutiae just for time's sake. But the 8 questions morely focus on what are the core values of the business and what's the focus? Is there, what's your 10-year target? Where do you want to be in 1 year and in 3 years as well? And then if you kind of break that down even further, what are your quarterly goals that you have? And data becomes a very important component to this. If you use EOS and run EOS, every single team in your company will have a scorecard and they will maintain and own a number on that scorecard. So as a member of a team, I make sure to populate that scorecard every week. And I'll give the one caveat that's also in the book that EOS is really good, as talked about with Gino Wickman, for companies that have employees from 10 to 250. That's really the sweet spot of where this operational system works very well. And building a process that helps you make sure that we're following, implementing this type of a framework in our system, in our business. Regarding traction is something that I think, and we'll talk more about this, but making sure we're making progress towards goals. And being in product, there's never a want for meetings in product management. You're always in tons of meetings, right? And so
Yes.
the thing that we want to make sure is that, are those meetings actually effective? Are we getting what we need out of it? Because having a meeting is expensive, and we want to make sure that we're making having it be effective. So we'll get into what that can look like. And then in those meetings, are we talking about the right issues? And then most important is the people. So how do we know we're going to hire the right people inside the company? And how do we know that those people are in the right seats? So setting up scorecards for those people and building out a bench before we even have a position open to make sure that we can hire the right people is important. So those are some of the buckets. I guess one last thing I'll just say about people is in the EOS framework, there's really a one thing to know at the very top, and that's driving this is you have what's called your visionary. So that's the CEO, typically, where they're driving the vision, they're driving the culture of this, and then you have an integrator, which is someone who is a operational expert, someone who's actually can take this vision and now operationalize it throughout the organization. And whether or not it was labeled this way for a bunch of companies, this is actually very common that very successful companies have very powerful visionary integrator relationships. Like you look at the example Walt Disney and Roy Disney, or Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Like just some, I mean, you could go on and on actually through very successful companies and see, okay, there was a visionary and an integrator relationship that really helped to drive a lot of this that you see that we'll be talking about.
And Todd, I know we're going to get into the details later, but like just thinking about, okay, I'm in the audience, this sounds really interesting, but maybe, I have to wrangle the entire company to move to this EOS system. Is there, like, obviously you can take things that are here. Like obviously there has to be some sort of North Star metric within your entire company, like even if it's just to reduce cost or increase revenue, something like that. Can you start small and kind of take what you have already and maybe assign tasks, or like slowly move into EOS and like sneak this in without actually like calling it EOS until you have everything in place and then you're ready to go?
Great question. So I just mine is an opinion, and so but my opinion is that you, in order to actually cause change management to happen, change is hard, and creating a big change like this would be very difficult. And so whether or not EOS is actually great for you is more. It's more about what is the framework that you're going to utilize to prioritize and to drive outcomes inside of your business and to create alignment around a mission. And I would argue that once you determine and you've sufficiently painted the problem, and so you got to get buy-in. And now I was not here when JobNimbus was going through that change management of EOS. That happened before I got to JobNimbus. But I will say it was a difficult thing. In talking to Ben Hodson, our CEO and founder, that was a difficult thing. It didn't happen at the flip of a switch. It did take some time, and it did take recognizing there's some issues, and then painting a picture of this could be resolved through these issues. I think a very successful ingredient in change management is, and not to be manipulative or anything, but to help people think that maybe an idea is their idea. And so if like you can help plant that, oh, there's a problem here. Well, let's direct that conversation to how do you think we could solve that problem? And do you think there's elements of this that could solve that? And kind of help people get a lot of consensus and alignment around that is very helpful. So that's just one of the things that I think is helpful in driving to an outcome, is making sure that we have clear alignment across what's the problem we're trying to solve, and now let's go execute on the operational side of this.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Because especially with me watching, all sorts of webinars, I'm always like, oh, that's such a great idea, but like, how do we actually like cause that change, or like, how do I bring it back to the team? So I think these are really good tips. Basically, like find that problem, get everybody aligned, and do your research too. Like you mentioned, like read the books, look at this process, and of course, we're gonna dive into what that actual scorecard is. So I'll stop asking you questions, and we can move on to the,
Great.
the
Yeah, and Jen, I'll
scorecard.
just add one other thing to that is I really think if you've now sufficiently gotten someone to see, okay, like your business partners or it's other employees in the company, to see there are some alignment issues, or maybe spinning our wheels a little bit or spending cycles on stuff that we shouldn't be spending, and you've created that problem. The thing that needs to now happen is, if you've agreed that, okay, this is the direction, we now need to commit to that direction 100%. In my mind, a half-baked framework of like doing some things and not other things, it's very hard to follow that when you have some of the company that's bought into it and some of the company that's not bought in. And so being like following with exactness is good. Whatever that like whatever you deem like the doctrine is, so to speak, like let's follow that with exactness. And it's a lot
Hmm.
easier to adhere to that from a cultural perspective as well.
Yes, yes,
Um,
definitely.
so as we kind of go through to talk a little bit more about EOS, so I'm going to first kind of say, how does this even apply? How did we apply this at JobNimbus? So I've talked a little bit about Ben Hodson, but Ben is our CEO and co-founder of JobNimbus. And he is our visionary, and he does a great job of setting the vision, which is truly the foundation of everything, making sure that everyone understands, in our case at JobNimbus, that we come to work every day to make contractors heroes. Now, Ben, there's like, what does Ben not do? He's a musician, he's a comic book writer, he's a serial entrepreneur, like he does
Dang.
a bunch of things, and he has a fascination around movies. And he's probably, no joke, I would bet anyone on this, he's probably the foremost world authority on movies of 1984. So
Just
he
that
has,
year.
yes, that year. He thinks that that's the best year of all of cinema, is the 1984. And
Okay.
he's actually watched every single movie that was made in 1984, has gotten the movie posters, written an analysis of every movie, and made a book about all of the movies about 1984. And so he knows a lot about movies, and one of the things that he talks about is a theme that is very present in a ton of movies. It's called the hero's journey. And he laces this hero's journey into JobNimbus all the time. There's really two facets of it. And before we get into those facets, for those that don't know, the hero's journey is a a framework that a writer can use to really pull in an audience and really get them interested in like a character story. So you'll see this like in Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or Spider-Man, or like Star Wars is super popular, where you start out in this like ordinary world and you go through like, so if you're Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, you start out, he's helping his aunt and uncle on a farm, and he's in this ordinary world, and then all of a sudden a mentor, which a mentor will always be present in this hero's journey, comes and he gets this call to adventure, where it's like, hey, you should come and train to be a Jedi, and there's typically a refusal of the call. It's like, oh, I can't go and leave the farm, like I got to stay here. And going through like all these steps, there's like 12 steps of this entire hero's journey, but they're called through this, they go through this big adventure, that at the end of that adventure they are a better person because of what they went through. And the two facets that Ben illustrates to JobNimbus about this, whether we're talking to customers or to employees working here, one, if you're an employee working here, we want you to be on your own hero's journey, that you're leveling up and that you're becoming a better person throughout your journey. If it's some of our customers, we want our customers to be leveling up in their business goals, and for us to show them, hey, there's some better ways to increase your operational efficiency and to look more professional and increase your profit margins by doing these things. And so that's really at the core of like at EOS, the vision is the total fundamental thing that then I now can choose I'm in meetings, as we're making decisions, it provides a lens of like, this is how we need to be thinking about this. Is this the best thing for our customers? Because does it meet our vision and mission?
Hmm.
So that's just an example of how that then flows down to everything else. The data that we track, the processes that we keep, the issues that we talk about in meetings, it funnels through that lens.
Yes, that sounds like it definitely keeps you on track, but also hilarious about the 1984.
Yeah,
And
right?
also, oh, that's great, especially the hero's journey and applying it to not only internal but external people as well. I think because of course you can talk about so many different topics on a meeting, and it's just like, oh, if you start going down a different side quest, may I say, then you can say, hey, let's get back to the topic at hand, or that's a good project for later, or something like that, and kind of reassess what the end goal is here.
Right, exactly.
I love that. So for everybody listening, any questions so far, again, put them in the chat. Happy to answer them so far. We did have a few questions earlier that I snuck in there, so those should be answered already. Taking a look at the list as well, I think we have a few coming up, so for now, I think we're okay. We can continue.
Okay, excellent. So this actually leads to a really important part that, again, I'm not an EOS coach or implementer, and so I'm not saying that like everyone has to do this approach, but this is one element that I think, regardless of whatever you're doing, it's about prioritizing. And the advantages of using EOS in product management is we're constantly prioritizing. Like that's literally what we do on a day in and day out basis, is prioritizing around what customers need. Sales needs this to sell to a prospective customer. Customer success needs this because an account that they have is requesting it. Marketing is needing to meet their lead quota, and they need this to market. And we're trying to balance all of these requests at the same time and make sure that the highest priority, highest value things getting done. And so EOS in this framework gives good clarity around what the priority is from a company level down. And so if you kind of look at, there's this example and adage that I'm sure everyone has heard of: you give someone like a jar and you have them there's rocks, pebbles, and sand. And if you start with the sand and the pebbles and the rocks, everything doesn't fit. The thing that you'll often hear is like, okay, well, now if you start with the rocks and then put the pebbles in and then the sand, the sand, everything fits. And I think, okay, that's a great message, but it actually isn't true reality in life. Like, one of the things in life is that you actually have to say no to things. And so when I was able to actually watch my kids get this analogy done, they went through this about a couple weeks ago. And luckily I was able to see this done in a way that I totally agree with, which is when you put in your rocks, your big goals, your big focus, and then your pebbles, and then your sand, some of the sand will probably not fit at the end. But that's okay, because it's sand. It's not your rocks or your pebbles. It's something that we deemed not of high priority, and it actually becomes a very good exercise to see that's okay that we didn't get to this stuff. And I think as we really start to figure out, okay, in an EOS framework, it's every quarter. We have our quarterly rock. So the company at a company level has a few rocks. This quarter, we have 3 rocks at JobNimbus for Q2. So we don't try to have too many, so that we can really focus as a whole company. And then all of the departments and all the teams within those departments will rally around, okay, now what are we going to do to help move that needle, that rock? And a rock would be typically something where you're saying, I want to move, if it's a metric, as an example, I want to move this metric from X to Y, and I want to do it by Z date, so that I can be able to clearly understand, did I miss the rock? Did we hit the rock? Are we on track? So that way we know, as we're tracking progress across the quarter, are we on track? Are we off track? If we're off track, we need to talk about it, those type of things. So it's, again, a way for us to kind of frame how we think about our priorities. And again, quarterly rocks is a big way that EOS does that.
Mm-hmm. And from like an individual contributor perspective, I would assume like someone on your team, if they came to you and said like, this is how I affected the rocks versus here's a pile of sand that I worked on, you're going to encourage, the work on the rocks, because it's the company initiative. It's not like these small projects that are still meaningful, but like you're saying, they have a bigger impact if you're working on company-wider initiatives. And again, from that individual contributor mindset, I'm thinking like, okay, promotions, raises, how do we make these people look good at their jobs? So, focusing on those bigger vision goals and how you're actually contributing to the company seems like more of a strategic way to also get your own career path moving forward as well.
Right. Yeah. And talk about buy-in. I mean, man, as an employee, if I can easily see that, man, what I'm doing every day is really helping the company. So you have a company goal or a company rock, and then from there you would create your own sub rocks for your team, and then you report out on that on a scorecard. Every day I know, okay, this metric that I'm is really laddering up and it's affecting the whole company. I mean, that's very empowering for someone, and I think extremely motivating for people to know I'm making a difference at where I'm at. I think uh, sometimes in careers you can get burnt out by not feeling like you're making enough of a difference. And this is a great way to combat that and make sure that everyone's aligned and moving and rowing in the same direction.
Yes, definitely. And raises.
And raise, yes, yes, that's right.
Yes, yes. Great.
Okay, so do you have any other questions coming through at all? I just want to make sure we're addressing those.
No, it's been
Okay,
pretty quiet, which just
okay.
means that we're killing it. We're explaining
Oh, man,
everything.
taking that, absolutely. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, let me just look at my notes really quick if there's anything else. We've covered a lot of them, especially with like the buy-in. How do I get started with EOS? I think we talked about, reading the books, getting some research, some information there. How long do you think it would take to actually like start implementing EOS, since we're talking a little bit about like that change management, maybe from like start to finish? How long did it take for JobNimbus, and then maybe in general, like how long do you personally think it would take just to even kind of get started there?
Yeah, good question. So again, I wasn't here during the time that it was implemented at JobNimbus, but I know that it's probably about I would guess 6 or so months to fully implement. And again, depends on the size of the organization to get implemented. But it really requires a lot of buy-in like really total buy-in from the CEO and the executives to help support that and really facilitate and bring that to their own departments and their teams and show this is how we're going to be operating and doing these things.
Yeah. So it takes a little bit of time, but definitely worth it.
Right, exactly.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and I think that the all of this to say with rocks and pebbles and sand that at the end of the day, what this leads to is like we have. So there's this quote: "Not don't confuse motion for progress." Is probably been something that you've heard in the past, and what this really gets to is that motion can refer to activity or movement, while progress it just progress refers to meaningful advancement towards something. So if there's a specific goal that you have in mind, I'm meaningfully advancing towards that goal. The like this phrase of "don't confuse motion for progress" really cautions us against mistaking motion for progress and encourages us and organizations to focus on activities that yield tangible results as opposed to just like I'm just going to keep busy for being busy's sake. And so that's what I'd encourage, this prioritization framework of thinking about what are the top 2 or 3 things, what are our rocks that we want to focus on right now, and then everything else either is prioritized at a later point or we just say, this is what we're not doing right now. It helps to drive a lot of clarity around that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, especially when talking about the scorecards that we'll see in a few slides here, what are some bad setups? I know that's our next slide, so I want to have those examples about like what not to do within this specific framework and scorecard.
Yeah, great question. So in making a scorecard, the number one thing is ensuring what is most important and creating a metric around that. And so if we were to look here, like one of the things is actually I'll give an example that just happened a little bit ago. So one of my teams, we're trying to figure out uh, how do we control a particular metric, and in this case we're looking at like year over year churn. And with year over year churn, it's that's a good thing to look at, and that was a rock that we had. But the issue is one finding reliable data that we could 100% fully rely on right away without having to do a lot of other work to get to that state. We realized we have to put some things in place for reporting purposes in order for us to get there. And then the second thing that we realized is the like year over year churn is such a lagging indicator and metric that I'll just give an example. If our year over year churn with a customer base went from 84.6% to 84.3%, like, well, what do you do? Like, what's the behavioral change that you actually change that week because that number went down or went up? It's so lagging that it's like I now can't actually tell causal data from correlated data and like what activities would lead where. And so that's something where, okay, we're maybe focusing on such lagging metrics that it doesn't inform us what to do today. Another area, and you'll see here on the slide, overemphasis on vanity metrics. So I was actually listening to a podcast. This was like a week or two ago, and there was a serial entrepreneur who was talking about success and failures of their businesses. And they just had sold off one of their, they talked about a story where they sold off one of their businesses and sold it for like multiple millions of dollars. Like it was north of $10 million that they sold off this smaller business for. And it was fascinating because as they were doing that, their whole objective and goal was to get eyeballs as a part of this business. And he was reflecting on it in the acquisition occurred, and then it's been about 15 years or so since that acquisition, and the total lifetime revenue from that company was $26,000. And so you look at like, did that, more than $10 million check actually pay out? And obviously in business, there's a lot of risks and whatnot. But in this case, vanity metrics were being utilized a lot to shape and make decisions, at least according to this entrepreneur, that it didn't actually yield a meaningful like revenue generation in this case. So I think that focusing on the wrong things is very important. And then the last thing would be like our scorecards are misaligned. So we might have these goals, but if we don't check them against, or we have these scorecards, but if we don't check these scorecards against our goals and make sure there is a direct link between the two, we can kind of quickly realize, oh, we're going off course here. Like this is cool, we have this goal, but actually what we're doing in our day-to-day isn't lining up to this. So we got to make sure we're continuing to link those two together and see alignment there.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Especially having reliable sources of data clearly can cost you a lot of money.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes.
So that's one area of where I would think, okay, this is an example of some like a bad setup, but I really think in terms of like, well, what does a good setup look like? Okay, tips for creating effective scorecards. There's a lot of really good things that we can do to generate a great scorecard. So the first question is making sure that you and your team realize what should we measure. And there will be a lot of debate and arguments about this, and that's great. That's exactly what you want around this type of conversation, is you want a lot of opinions and figuring out what do you measure, because you don't want to measure 1,000 things because that's going to be too overwhelming, and it's going to lead to a lack of focus. And so pick those few things that you really want to measure. Now that if you've generated some rocks or some goals, now how do we know that those goals or those rocks are being accomplished? And I would suggest taking, a handful, 5, 10 different metrics. It could even be a little bit more than that, of this is how we're going to measure that this was successful. And then build a process to measure. So the cadence, in my opinion, and what we do here at JobNimbus is every week we have a scorecard, and we fill out that scorecard where everyone has a number, and they're responsible for coming back and reporting on that number every week. And they'll see here's what the goal is, and here's what the number is, and you can kind of build a trend over time and understand that. The other thing that is important here is to have a mix of leading and lagging metrics. So in a scorecard, when you look at both leading and lagging indicators, it really does provide a comprehensive view of your organization's performance. So in your leading indicators, that's where you'll see a lot of predictive value. So they're forward looking. You're looking towards early signals of future performance. That, I mean, it's literally as it suggests, we're looking forward on this. It also helps to really provide course correction. So it's like, we don't want this intended outcome. We got to course correct real quick. So that's what a leading indicator is really good for. And then you also want to make sure that it leads to influencing your actual outcomes. Why you want to mix this with a lagging indicator is because lagging indicators are outcomes. That's your outcome measurement. That's what you're seeing. This is what the clear picture is of past performance. It also is really validating and does provide accountability towards outcomes. So if you can mix the two together, it provides a very kind of comprehensive view into what your scorecard should be.
Mm-hmm. We have a question, and could you give an example of some of those lagging metrics?
Yeah, great question. So this could be anything from like product adoption or churn is a lagging metric. Churn is actually a really good lagging metric. So let's say that you have a cohort of individuals that you're looking at, and this could be, or rather, let's say a segment, and you are segmenting your user base off of like enterprise customers and mid-market customers, and you're realizing, there's a lot of churn in my enterprise segment, and we want to decrease that churn by 10%. Okay, well, that's our goal. So our lagging metric here is literally the actual churn itself. And so now it's, okay, what can we do to decrease churn? Let's look at some more leading indicators. Maybe they're churning because they're experiencing a lot of crashes in the app. Or maybe they're churning because they aren't getting to our really like sticky features quick enough. And so their time to value to get to those features doesn't happen fast enough. Okay, well, now a leading indicator could be, okay, let's get our time to value down for this segment from 4 days from account setup to 2 hours from account setup, and figure out what are ways that I can surface these aha moments earlier and help these enterprise customers. That's just an example of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any suggestions of like picking those metrics, or maybe a resource to kind of look at like industry metrics for those mobile app leading and lagging metrics, or any top 3 favorites that you just kind of go to?
Yeah, great question. And so it really depends on what the company's objective and mission is. So churn is always very important particularly for a SaaS company. NRR is a very important metric. Net revenue retention is very important, and you want to see that number continue to grow north of 100%. So let me explain NRR real quick just to make sure we're all aligned. So if you add a customer and you're at 100%, let's say that they give $100, and of that $100 someone takes away $1. Now we're at 99%. But someone adds, or if someone adds $1, you'd be at 101% as your NRR percentage. And a very successful SaaS company would be north of 100%, like 108%, as people are kind of expanding and people are continuing to use the product and seeing value in the product over time. And so that's a big metric to follow. Another one would be churn. The reason why NRR is so important is churn plays a factor into NRR. Another factor is actually usage. So you can measure usage a number of ways. It could be session length. It could be number of sessions. It could be weekly active users, daily active users, monthly active users. But actual account usage is a very important metric, in my opinion, also to continue to measure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, good tips.
Okay, so here are those are just some tips to look at. The other element to this is, okay, well, what does JobNimbus use? And I can also even just illustrate this on our scorecard, just an example scorecard that we have. But we look at, as an example, this is just from like our iOS team. So the iOS app rating is very important. Number of iOS ratings is very important. We want to have a very clean like pipeline as we're building having builds, and so number of failed deployments is important. And then you can look at, all right, feature usage. So this gets in. So some of these are lagging metrics here. So you now have, well, what percentage of our users are using this given feature? Whether it's our photo feature, or app mentions, or percent of users using email. This is where you need to figure out what features in your app are leading to sticky customers, and then making sure that we're really focused on driving adoption for those features. And then some of the more leading indicators, crash-free sessions, crash-free users, and we want to make sure that we don't dip below a certain amount. So, for crash-free users, we want to have that be north of 98, 99% as our goal. So we don't want to have too many users experiencing that. And then, like we talked about, monthly active and weekly active users. Mm-hmm. So here's what that looks like on a scorecard. Inside of our scorecard, we utilize just Google Sheets, nothing fancy. And every week, we each have, you'll see on this column here, the first column is a owner who owns this metric, who owns the number. And they're responsible for reporting out that number. And then if that number goes up or down, well, as it goes down, it's like, ooh, okay, that's something we might want to talk about then. We might want to make sure we're talking about this and bringing this up in some of our meetings that we have. But what this does is it helps to align around, this is what's important to us as a team. It sets the team culture of this is what's important, and then creates a lot of alignment around that team.
There's a question if we'll share the document. I know this is your actual scorecard, so maybe not, but
Well, yeah, this is just this is a template. So believe it or not, we
okay.
don't have like people on the team named Michael or David or Benjamin.
Shocking.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
but yes, so we could share that out.
okay, good. Yes, because I was gonna say, it looks like it can be as easy as this, where you just create something within Excel, Google Sheets, even like Jira. I mean, in my opinion, it looks like it doesn't have to be overly fancy, correct?
Yeah, just like I think the purpose of this is make it easy. So if you've read the book Atomic Habits, inside that book it talks about how James Clear, the author of that book, talks about how you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so as you're building a habit, and this needs to be a habit, this needs to be like just built into your organizational culture and to just this framework, make it as easy as possible. And so you'll see we make it for them. They can open up this Google Sheet. We've actually linked that. You'll see these blue, all of these link to where I go to get the data, or where these people go to get the data, and make it super simple. I click on this link, and setting this up is going to take a little bit of time. You're going to have to slow down a little bit to speed up. But when you click on this, it will ultimately tell you what the number is. I just report that number, and then we move on. And so that ultimately every week, this is only taking 2-3 minutes to populate the scorecard.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. And I do see Carl's question, but I think we will address that in a few slides. So I will definitely make time for that question as well. But let's talk about actually populating that scorecard. Like you said, where do we get that information from?
Okay. Yes, so this is where we need to determine what's important to us at the time, and then we might be pulling from a number of areas. And UXCam has been with JobNimbus since the beginning of our new apps going out, and so it's been actually a very good partnership in helping us structure the scorecard. So we've been able to utilize the dashboards feature a lot, which I know we'll get into in a little bit. But that has been able to help us to see this is what our product adoption metrics are. Here's what our crash-free users are. Here's all of the data that we need, and it centralizes that into one environment for us.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Perfect. So especially me working at UXCam, I obviously work with a lot of product managers across all different kind of industries, all different kind of mobile apps. So the challenges that they face, I obviously have heard a lot of them. So like you were saying, if the data is all over the place, it makes it harder to update these scorecards, be transparent about what's going on with your goals, have that communication. It's also difficult to prove out that ROI. So again, talking about like sand versus rocks, where does this fit in if we're looking at a vanity metric, like you said? Does that matter? Does that not matter? And then obviously difficulty connecting the dots between what that impact is. So I think, again, Carl, your question about like, how do we make sure that KPIs connected to scorecards have an actual impact on that North Star metric of the company? I'll show you how to pull that data from UXCam, but also I think Todd will actually show you like the breakdown of the meetings and that agenda to also like showcase that the data that you're getting is mattering for the company and those rocks versus sand.
Perfect.
All right, so let me quickly show you what the JobNimbus team is doing. I think once a week, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, about like pulling that data from UXCam and populating it within the scorecard there.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Okay, I think you have to stop sharing your screen for me to share.
Oh, great.
Thanks. All right, so let's hop in here. Okay, so UXCam is basically going to be giving you all of your mobile data in one place. So it's the single source of truth for your mobile users. So here we're looking at a dashboard that I created basically as a sample to see the metrics that Todd was talking about. So Todd's team is coming into UXCam weekly to pull this data and populate that scorecard. So within UXCam, you can really track anything that your users are doing, and then these customizable dashboards make it great so that you can look at the data that you care about. So of course, again, talking about metrics that don't matter, we don't want to see that information. We want to log in quickly, get the information that we want, go to our meeting with Todd, tell him how great we are, and get a raise. That is the goal. So especially with me being in customer success, my goals are my clients' goals. So again, I'm looking at how do I make my clients look good in their specific roles. So when I talk to product managers, I specifically help them set up these dashboards like we're looking at here today. So here we can see something like those monthly active users, an email adoption, maybe a specific prompt that was triggered, features that are being used, average session time. So again, leading and lagging metrics that we're looking at here. So again, this is just an example, but you can create your own reports within UXCam simply picking off of our library. You don't have to be, an analytics wizard to create these metrics. You have the library at your fingertips, but more importantly, you can build from scratch really any report that you would like here. So again, looking at like crashes, making sure that people aren't churning because of these stability issues. UXCam is giving you the context and the data, especially from a product perspective, to go to the engineering team to say, hey, there is a problem on this specific screen. And I know maybe it's not level 1 that you have to fix right now, but it's affecting conversions, which is the vision of the goal of the company. And we want that to be number 1 priority. So thinking again about the visions and how your specific work impacts the overall company. UXCam is giving you that data to actually show how that impacts it. So I'll just quickly show you that you can see again, like maybe count of users with a crash, total of those users with a crash, and then you can group this by any way that you would like. So you can look at like a time metric, you can look at again the screen in which that crash is occurring, you can look at device properties like app version, app model. I know this is very popular for QA teams, design teams, and then user properties. So Todd was talking earlier about your user segments. So are your enterprise teams having more crashes than your SMB teams? Are your early adopters having more crashes than your later adopters? You can cut this data, your mobile data, any way that you want, and really UXCam is giving you that answer to that question that you have within your mobile application here. So of course, you can visualize this any way that you would like. chart table, even just a big number, you have options to change the charts and also download the data. So it makes it very simple, even to, again, not having such a robust experience within analytics, to come into UXCam and get those answers to the questions that we're talking about today. So I will hand it back over to Todd, but just wanted to show you basically the back end of how Todd's team is getting that information for the scorecard there.
Great. Yeah, it's been extremely impactful for us at JobNimbus to be able to make that happen. Like being able to see all of the data in one centralized place has been extremely useful for us. Okay, let me go here and just finish. I know we have just a few minutes. Oh, I stopped sharing. Let me go back. Sorry.
It's okay. You didn't hang up, so that's fine.
That's right. Oh, and while I'm doing that, looks like we have a question about integrating with UXCam.
Yes. So
So
integration on the back end, about 5 minutes for developers just to put that code within the actual SDK. And then Todd, as for like ramping up with UXCam, feel free to add context.
yeah, it's very simple to add. The screens will need just to be marked with some data, some tags, and it's very easy to add that. So UXCam's made it very, very nice to integrate and onboard there. Okay, so we have just 4 minutes, so we'll go through the rest of this pretty quick. But and Carl, this kind of gets to the question that you asked. So a big thing when it comes to making sure that we're improving our goals, and we're meeting our goals, and we're actually improving the metrics that we need to see improved to hit those goals, and that could be like our North Star metric. We really want to experiment a lot. It's actually, when you set some goals, sometimes you have the exact goal and the destination of where you want to go, but you don't necessarily know the exact path on how you'll get there. And so you build an operational plan around it, and that operational plan will help you tell you this is how you should get there. But there's constant experimentation that you'll be running. And so here's just an example of some experimentation that is done. This is actually from DocuSign. But this is just keep an experiment log. We have an experiment log here at JobNimbus as well, where week in and week out, you want to be running multiple experiments which measure and see, does this improve our metric? And we build out hypotheses, make sure that you are generating insights so that if I'm a new employee that's coming into a team, I can go and refer to the fact that, oh, here's the experiments that we've run. Here was the insights that we ran. Here is the next steps based upon the experiments that we've had. And a lot of those learnings can actually be shared in this weekly L10. So if you do EOS, and regardless if you do it, have a meeting like this. But if you do it, this is a very important, and I view like as a sacred meeting. So an L10 is a time when every team comes together and they are going to be building they're talking about the most important things. So why it's called an L10 is that stands for a level 10. And every person should be ranking that meeting at or near a 10 of a scale of 1 to 10. It should be very effective. And I'll just go through the agenda real quickly. So this is just a template of what the agenda could look like. But you start off with like good news, just to kind of icebreaker with the team. And you can see like Bill is the lead in his family's March Madness bracket. That's great.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so there's all of these things that would come in, and then you have, okay, now let's go to our scorecard. So what I just showed you a little bit ago, we'll go from this document back to our scorecard, review the scorecard, see what's off. If there's something that's off, we put it on what's called the IDS, the Identify, Discuss, and Solve area. And so if there's a metric that's off, or if we feel like we're off track on our rocks, man, that's something that we have to talk about in this time frame. We then go to our 90-day review, determine if we are on track or not on track. That goes to our quarterly rock. We then give some customer employee headlines, like, hey, what are some customers saying, or what are some good or bad things that are happening that are in the organization we should talk about. If there's any prior action items that we have, let's review what those were. And then this is where we then move and actually rank. So the team will say, okay, what's the most important IDS topics that we should be talking about? And then what are the action items from those topics? And it ladders up so that these topics should be laddering up to say, this is what, if we're off track on a particular rock, okay, why are we off track? What are the things that we could do? What are the experiments that we can have to see, try to get us back on track and course correct? So this is an extremely important part of the EOS framework.
Mm-hmm. So especially with this meeting that you're having, do you have separate meetings for the IDS topics as well? Like just quick meetings, or do you have like scheduled meetings to go over those as well?
Yeah, great question. So we have a quarterly meeting where we review the company rocks at a company-wide level. And then on a team level, we have weekly meetings, which is the IDS where we discuss it. So this is an hour meeting every week. And then there's outside of this meeting, we run our different meetings like backlog refinement, our ideation meetings, those type of things. But this is a once a week meeting called our level 10 meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. So yeah, I think we are a minute over. I'm so sorry. Thank you all for staying with us. I know we have 3 takeaways basically. So Todd, thank you so much for running through EOS scorecards, what's working, what's not working, the data that you're providing with your team. So for today, if you don't remember anything else, I have 3 takeaways for you, which is create your EOS scorecard. Make sure that you're measuring your success in some way. Make sure that, don't confuse motion for progress there. You definitely want to set up a process for success. It doesn't have to be EOS. It does have to be at least something. And make sure that you're prioritizing the right things. Again, pebbles, sand, make sure that they're rocks if you can. So thank you all for joining. Todd, again, thank you so much for running through all of the tips and tricks, especially how JobNimbus runs their meetings and basically how you've gotten to this successful point in your career. So again, thanks for the time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to team@uxcam.com. The recording will be sent to you, and I hope that you can all join us next time. So thank you all, and have a good one.
Thanks.